This is Robert L. Green. This is the second part of the Pauline Trigère oral history interviews, and this takes place on November 16th, 1979, at Pauline Trigère's Park Avenue apartment. We, in talking with you, Pauline, there were a couple of things that were sort of left loosely hanging that I wanted to pursue. One of them was that you, in discussing your career, mentioned realistically that when you started, there were no American designers. There were no names that one automatically associated with American design. And you talked about people who were manufacturers and people who were cutters and people who just simply produced clothing as tailors, as opposed to the few people who were couture designers. Trace for me in your own head, from your own experience, when the involvement of the American designer.
I think it came, Robert, when the firm who were manufacturers in America, I don't know much about the beginning because I was myself a very struggling beginner, but I do remember there were people who were selling, let's say, clothes. They were selling skirts, and they were selling tops, and they were selling pants on. And then this created some probably toppers, that's an expression that I forgot, and they put them all together. The people who were selling more expensive merchandise, I think, went to Paris to pick up a few ideas and bought, maybe not necessarily couture, but they went to Paris and they bought something and brought them here to their so-called, they used to be called designers, and they made clothes. Nobody was interested in finding out the name of the designer. They were just interested in having garments to put on their bodies. But when the war stopped communication and you couldn't go to France, naturally it evolved in here. And I think that maybe Eleanor Lambert should be credited to have created the very first Coty Award. She made us all realize that we had talent in here, and everybody started putting names on labels and things like this, but I don't think it's before 1945.
It's interesting if you think of that period, Pauline, that I remember it well, and I remember looking at fashion magazines at that time, and whenever I could get a hold of them in the service, and realizing that much of what was being done in the initial stages came out of the military.
Yes. Yes.
If you remember the Eisenhower
also,
jacket.
I think that maybe we didn't dare. Maybe we didn't dare also making extravaganza. I don't think, the period that we have today, the photographs of the things that are coming out of everywhere are kind of peculiar. There is not one direction, which is okay too. But in those days, and then of course I remember, maybe I'm ahead of my story, when the what was the name of a
WPA?
The regulations that you couldn't use more, you couldn't use more than 2 yards and 1/8 for a coat, and you couldn't make a jacket longer than 24 inches or 23. They wanted to conserve material, which was a way of doing it. I remember that I have the coat in my collection, my museum collection. I made a coat with the one-piece sleeves attached, and that wasn't allowed, but it was a short cape. It had no sleeve, but it's a cape that's cut with the body, and we sold it very well. I was called in the front of a bunch of examiners, and I had to prove that my coat was not taking more than whatever it was. That was a funny experience. I think, anyway, it was in 1945 and 6 when we couldn't go, when the manufacturer couldn't go to Paris, and I think that's all they went. I don't think they went to Milano. I don't think they went to England. I think they just went to France, to Paris. At that time, America became the makers of designers per se. I think they just evolved.
You think the initial careful identification by these designers with military things, silhouettes, was because they perhaps were not ready to leave the nest and assume that they could create directions for themselves?
No, I think maybe we felt a great responsibility to the men in the army and conservation of certain things, and I don't think anybody really dared to be different than the others, and I think that they didn't want to be really singled out if you went to wherever you went, in showing that you had there. I suppose. I don't know. And of course, when you leave, when after this, the American designer became what they are today, slowly but surely, and presented their collection maybe twice a year, and we really had to do something for spring and then something for fall, and really separate the woolens from the silks and the lightweight. I think at that time, when you start making a collection, not just a group of clothes, when you make a collection, you naturally go in many more directions. You know, don't forget in 1945 and 46, when all that started, what the people needed were simply cover up. They needed to put a new coat or something on their body to be warm or to be cooler. It's later on when we start with the showings and all the things that were already, you know, what do you call it? You decided dates. Everybody had this kind of a competition. I think that started. Look at what we do today. We do 5 collections. That's ridiculous too.
Which was the first designer name that you can associate with America?
In America, it was definitely Norel, because he was the first one that really had the statue, and also the first one who was acclaimed and decorated and singled out to get the first Coty award in my days. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. The one that comes to my mind now is Nettie Rosenstein, the little black dress. Nettie Rosenstein and her sister-in-law, Eva Rosenkrantz, they were the one, because I was on 47th Street first, and they were right there too. That was a little group on 40, so we knew through the workers the name. And it goes...
What position did Claire McArdle have in this?
It's later on that I was aware of the great Claire McArdle. It took me a little time. You have to remember that in my own life, I was certainly busy with my own life, let's put it that way, which was tied up with raising kids and having my mother with me, and it was a responsibility, and trying to establish myself as something here. And when you have that in your mind, and we didn't have the communication we have today. Everything is meteoric today. I mean, a new name, you see a splash, anything. But in those days, the communication was slower. We didn't have that many customers who came to New York and would tell you, you know, Claire McArdle did this. The names were not circulated as fast as they are today. Claire has a unique place in the...
How would you describe her place?
I describe, you know, I tell you when I discovered Claire McArdle, now it comes back to me, and that's why those conversations are very good for my future. You see, I'll remember my life. In 1947, I took my very first trip to California, and I went to San Francisco. It was a pleasure trip, if you can call it so. A friend of mine was in Los Angeles, and I said, well, if I go to the coast, I'm going to go to San Francisco. I mean, the same. And it was a long trip, I forgot how long. But I went to San Francisco and I visited Magnin, the great Magnin that you heard, that gold, 24 karat gold faucets. And I went there and I met a lady by the name of Julia Trissel, who was the buyer of the bathing suits. And she showed me around. For some reason, somebody said, go and see Julia Trissel, so I went. I will never forget, I bought 17 bathing suits. I bought them, maybe a few for me. I thought it was marvelous to bring them back to my girls as presents. 12 of them were Claire McArdle's, very typical. You could wear, I'm so sorry that I got rid of those because they could be perfect today. And they had little hooks in the front. They were so special, and they were so much me as a wearer of her bathing suit, and so much me as the maker of the simple clothes I made. That's when I became aware of Claire. And when I came back, I was still on 57th Street until I moved. I told you before, I forgot, 53 I moved. So I was still, that's when I discovered Claire.
The reason that I asked about Claire is because the name that is associated in many people's minds as being the person who was probably most important in developing the American designer was Dorothy Shaver, who was then president of Lord & Taylor. She
had visions.
And faith in the fact that there
she
was
had vision, and I think she picked very good ones. She picked Claire. I'm very happy to tell you that I have somewhere in my books marvelous. Let me tell you something about Dorothy Shaver. I knew her very little. The first time she put some clothes in the windows and I was thrilled. Okay, it was maybe 45, 40. Later on, there was I forgot the name of our display man, but I remember he called me and he said, the corner window on 38th Street, 38, yes, and
was it
5th.
Henry Callahan?
Maybe it was Henry Callahan. That's probably who it was. We're going to make it very personal. We want to have a piece of, a piece of furniture, and what is your favorite flower? And nice. That is the first time that somebody bought, I think it's called, the first time that somebody bought a little tables before I had those, a little weekend table which I have in the bedroom, that we transported, and a chair that belonged to me, with 2 little vases, and I remember a yellow flower and a red rose, plus a Trigère dress. The association of the person with the designer. I think Henry did that with the support and the direction of Dorothy Shaver.
Because I have great affection and admiration for Eleanor Lambert, but I think Eleanor could only have done what she did if there were already American designers that had been established.
Right. Now you see, you're probably right. I don't retrace it so much because I tell you again, I was so involved with really trying to make a living. It wasn't easy. It wasn't anything against. Sometimes you are kind of. Right now, I know what's going on. First of all, I read much more. Well, there is much more communication, I guess. I don't know that. When was Time magazine created? In those days, you had Life, which you read. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's very strange what you say. Now there was Pierre McArdle, and there was somebody else that she promoted. I forgot. Bonnie Cashin came later, no?
Yes, but also supported by Dorothy Shaver.
Yes.
And recognized.
Yes.
You see, I feel that the myth that Americans could not design was exactly that, but the myth created its own insecurities. Thus, designers felt that they really didn't have the talent, that unless the direction came from Paris.
Yes, but you see, there is this kind of an extraordinary aura on the French couture, which started there, so okay, we have it there. But it's no longer true. It's no longer true. We have the same talent here. We don't do the fittings like the main Boucher used to do here, or Lanvin, the rest. I don't think they do much of that there either. I don't know. Balenciaga, for instance, everybody's into prêt-à-porter, and they dare more here. But my goodness, look at what we have here. It's fabulous. It took 25 years to...
Certainly. Go back to the French couture for a moment. As you knew it when you were living in France, and as you
I knew it little. We were completely separated from. If you touched a button or if you just imitated a shoulder, you were not put in prison, but you were fined. It was a very... First of all, the French magazine never printed anything. Suppose a collection was shown, let's say, the 7th of July. You know when we would see it in the magazine? Sometime in September. Right. Here, if it's shown the 7th of July, you have the printed thing on the 5th of July. Before this, it's women's wear and all the communication. But in those days, we knew the couture way after it was already bought and sold to those women. I didn't know very much about that at all. We knew the names.
Are there other reasons why the creativity in France has always seemed to flow more actively?
I think it came from the exchange of the designer with his customer. I remember the great days when I first got married. The great things that I did in France, not having too much money, but more than when I lived in here because we worked and we were okay, it's going to the races on Sunday. And to go to the races on every Sunday, you saw Mrs. Martinez, the host, the great Argentinian, very, very chic woman, who every Sunday was dressed by couture in a different way. Every week she had another dress, another hat, and everybody follows suit. I think that a woman like Mrs. Martinez de Rose will go to Paulette or another millionaire and said, for next week at the Grand Prix, I want a big hat or I want a small hat. There was that exchange. I think it came from the relationship of the couturier with Mrs. whoever it was, who, because of the excitement created by seeing one lady, wanted to have something else. We don't have this here. We have it now a little bit by looking at the windows, but actually every one of us, we work in a kind of a, well, it's not exactly close, but we really work for each other, for ourselves in a compact workroom. That's why I like to go on the road. I think why Bill Blass goes on the road, everybody goes on the road to find out what Mrs. Jones of whatever wants. She may not tell me, that lady, that she wants a special thing, but a reaction to what I do and what she's going to wear teaches me something, unless I would be completely blocked, which I'm not.
It's interesting because when I left here and thought about the conversation that we had, there were lovely little moments that I wanted to pursue. One of them, for instance, was that you had contact with Travis Bampton. Now, Travis Bampton, in the minds of people who know fashion, associate him with Hollywood,
yes,
with the Dietrich dresses, with the famous Dietrich
but really not
dresses.
at all with Mrs. Savarage America, who works on even on Fifth Avenue, forget Third Avenue. He had none at all of that. I can remember vividly the sketches that I have. First of all, a day dress he made never. I mean, they didn't know a day dress, he didn't know what it was. His client, his customer in his mind started leaving at 6 o'clock at night. And then, of course, they bloomed for a great big party. I don't remember anything daytime at all. For him, daytime was sleeping and just recuperating from the night before, I suppose. It's true. But,
were his clothes that he made for couture as theatrical as his clothes that he made for the movies?
Well, I tell you something, Robert. I started working with Travis in July 1942. Yes. But I don't care about that. Don't disturb me because I can't be. Tell him not to ring me, please. Where was I? I forgot.
We're talking about Travis Bampton, and you were talking
well, Travis Bampton. So I met him sometime in July. I worked with him maybe August. No, wait a minute. It was September, excuse me. I started working at Carnegie in September 1942, and I worked there September, October, November. 7th of December, the whole thing was kaput. Okay? And so I worked with Travis. By the time he gave me his first sketches, first of all, Miss Carnegie had an assistant there who couldn't understand a line or anything of Travis's sketches. They were so outrageously funny, you know. It really, they had trains, they had plumes, the scarf was standing up by itself, I don't know how, by what miraculous bones it would stay there. So I did one collection with him for the couture. That was the couture collection of Hattie Carnegie. She had a system, Hattie. If she liked a dress, then she would give it to, I told you, that other Spectator Sport, and they would take out a little bit, and that dress went into her. She was one of the first prêt-à-porter, ready to wear. So I made one collection with him, and then after that, he disappeared. I saw him a long time after that. We just became good friends, and we saw each other for dinner with his wife. But he didn't do anything after that at all. He was gone. You know, Hollywood didn't want him anymore. And yet the dresses he made for Marlene, weren't they something?
Yeah, they're extraordinary. If you look at the stills and some of his sketches, you get the sense, of course, that he understood one simple truth, that clothes in the motion picture industry were never made to be worn. They were made to be photographed.
I suppose.
The function of clothes.
And there also there was an enormous relationship between the clothes to the car, to the surrounding, to the living room, which doesn't exist today. Did he do the clothes for Marlene and Gary Cooper in when she steals pearls? What's the name of that?
Desire.
Did he do?
Absolutely.
Do you remember those?
The white dress for
the white with the black.
Ah,
Well, I mean, I will never
dress.
forget it. It's incredible, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And her hats and she also had great allure, fantastic.
Did he have any influence on you?
No, not at all. We never worked at all in the same direction. I really, frankly, didn't understand the clothes. I tried to execute them because I was there to do that, It's really like reading a recipe. I don't know what they put, but I would do it if I really want to do it. No, not at all. Hattie Carnegie had, because Hattie Carnegie, I saw a reaction to the thing. When you have a designer like Travis Brenton, I remember a dress he made. It was a very Spanish dress with about 17 volant ruffles, white organdy with red piping. The dress must have cost Hattie Carnegie in those days about probably $1,000 a labor. I don't think the dress was ever sold. As a showpiece, it was fantastic. It's like the thing I saw in the theater yesterday. He didn't care. He did things that had no relation to to that time's life. Not at all. He was a dreamer.
I was going to say perhaps he was working out of his own fantasies. I find that when people do things like that, they have no interest in reality. They don't want to hear anything about labor costs or details.
I remember his wife, I forgot her name, Billy, I think, Bendy or Billy, who was a blonde, kind of very string-bingy, very thin. And I remember that for 3, 4, 5 months, this lady wore the same black dress, sometimes with a little beanie, sometimes with a big hat and pearls. He had the theory, one black dress can take you very many places, which is maybe that, I don't think it influenced, I'm just thinking about it now. I don't know, I never have any curiosity, but I love to look at other people's work like I look at paintings in a museum. I get something of the complete look to tell you that I have a peculiar attitude when I go to stores. I don't look at the outside of the dress. I always want to know how the hem is finished. I want to see what they do that I don't do, or what I do better. That's what the first thing I do is to turn a dress inside out to see how they seem. I couldn't care less about what other designers do. Why should I? I admire them. I'm not trying to emulate them at all. I am Trigère, and I've got to keep doing what I do best.
Trace for me then, when you start a collection, you know you have a collection that you now must start on. What are the specific steps that you take?
Well, the first thing we do is to buy fabrics, and then something happens in the process of buying. We see, yesterday for instance, I saw about 3 enormous collection of silks and things until I didn't know what I was looking at. But when we buy woolens, for instance, I would select a plum or a green, just like that, and we buy a piece or we buy 5 yards, whatever. And then we see another collection. Somehow, after 3 weeks of buying, the collection turns either green or purple, something, I don't even match them, but something happened in the process of buying. So we have a base, so the collection might be, there will always be black, there will always be red, because they are basic and classic. But there will be, the fall collection may be purple next time or maroon, whatever. But it's something that happens without me knowing it. Then we buy the classics. We buy the woolens for the dresses, the jersey that we use year in, year out, and we do the Melton and the velour that we do for coats. Okay, these are the classic, and we know we're going to have to do certain things in those fabrics because we'll sell them to Chicago everywhere. Then comes the collection of silks and chiffons and satin, and then of course whatever the French or the Italians or the Swiss come here with. It directs the collection. If the collection is very taffeta or very stiff, you know you're going to have a stiffer collection, the skirt will be fuller. If it's chiffon, it's going to be... It's not something that we decide in advance. Now we have that. In my mind, when I start working, we try to continue for the very first garments the silhouette that's been good the preceding season. Not making it exactly, but we know that the buyers, if they have loved a certain shoulder or a certain waistline, they will feel secure if they sold it. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
I'm helping them. I'm perfectly ready to make a revolution or an evolution. But if you make the same thing, the buyer will feel very comfortable. She sold, 20 pieces like that, she'll buy it right away. So we start like this. I start in many ways. The coats and the jersey dresses, the one that I don't drape, I make baby sketches that my assistant Lucy puts in better sketches, and we give them to the assistant. But the new...
What is a baby sketch?
Oh, it's a sketch about 1.5 inches that I do on my program on a piece of newspaper, mostly on envelopes. I'm a very extravagant person, but my notes are always in beautiful envelopes. The invitation that you throw out, you know, that's I love to write on those heavy cards. I think many people have that. You know, the pantyhose, they are always wrapped on those. I keep those. I think it's fantastic to make your telephone list. I make sketches on that too. Well, you know, so I make that. But the beginning of a collection may be trying sometime until we get the first 5, 6 fittings. And something happens. If we like something, we'll make a dress out of that. We'll make a coat, we'll make a suit, and then as we go nearer and nearer the completion of the collection, 3 weeks before is where we really work. Then we know the direction. We force a silhouette. What I mean by forcing, we make more of it. It's very bad to have, let's say, a balloon sleeves and then a flat sleeves and then something with a sleeve. Then the customer is confused. If you believe in something, you have to just do it a couple of times so that the viewer will know, well, Pauline believes in that and Joe believes in something else. A collection is made of many, many moods. I can be working at fittings, and I work at fittings a great deal, and the people who work in the material room come with some new fabric that just arrived from the plane. I drop what I do. I'm very unruly in my way of working. I drop what I do and I start playing with the fabric. And the fabric is really my dictator, always has been. If it's a panel print, you know what a panel is. It's a piece of fabric that's a certain length. You cannot just cut it any old way. You have to just go in the direction of what it is. I play with it, I pin it, I drape it on the model. Then I throw it away and something happens in my head. I mean, sometimes nothing comes out. And if I'm lucky and a model of mine wants to stay after 6 o'clock, that's where I work the best. From 6 to 9 o'clock at night, I can do an enormous amount of work. The telephone rings less. Then the creative process, I do all kinds of peculiar things late at night.
Do you do a lot of experimenting and rejecting of things that you may have cut in terms of fabric?
Well, yes. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes we buy a new fabric that we don't like to. See, I wear a lot of the clothes, Robert. I think this is probably one of the strengths of Trigère. I wear, I don't mean style-wise, I'm dressed pretty much in the same kind of feeling. But I do have to know the performance of a new fabric. If I sit at a concert or driving my car and the fabric doesn't do what I want, I try not to use it again. I mean, I'm very sincere, but sometimes I'll wear, for instance, silk. I know what it will perform. Some fabric, some cotton that wrinkle, if I like them, we'll keep them in the collection, but that's something else again. The collection, after we see 18 or 20 pieces, we see them on 2 girls. The trick is to take 2 new models who have never put the clothes on, and we put, and you know their reaction. Oh, I love it, and sometimes they don't make, that doesn't mean anything, but I like to see the reaction of a model who comes from maybe 20 other designers. I know, she won't tell me if she does. They don't do that. They put the garment on and that's it. But when you see a girl very excited, you know you got something. Then we have, maybe 3 times, let's call it a reviewing, a rehearsal. And we show unfinished garment. The bottom is hanging, no hem, no top, to the people the salespeople, the material people, the production men. They sit there and they look. And to me, this is the worst thing in the world. It's like having an exam that you know you're not going to pass.
You're being judged.
Well, I judge myself very severely. I'm my most severest critic, I hope. Sometimes they discuss with me, why do you do that? I say, because I like it. If I like it very much, Robert, nobody's going to talk me out of it. Nobody. I'll finish it. Like the last collection, we made some things. They said, that's not for us. I said, well, I know it is for us. And it's the hottest selling. I don't know, I had a feeling. I cannot tell that I'm always right. I'm not. But we do that with the people, and the salespeople, they keep you in the right track, because we haven't got a dress with sleeves. We haven't got a dress with a jacket. I said, oh, for God's sakes, we've done those. But that's what we're going to sell. I don't want to make them. We have to make them because Mrs. Lady in Podunk or in Chattanooga, that's what she wants. So they keep me in tracks. And so we make those simple things, which are the backbone of the collection to sell from size 4 to 20. We need them. You know, it's like bread and butter in a restaurant.
How many pieces in a total collection?
In the fall collection, we go up to 120. We're trying to get it down now. The last collection we showed was 108 pieces. This one, the spring, is a small one, and I'm very happy about it, because to make a small collection, it's like writing a book. You have to just have time to eliminate. You remember my dear friend Victor Hugo, he wrote to his friend, he says, I'm sorry I sent you a long letter, I didn't have the time to make a short one. It's the same thing. To make a shorter collection, you have to eliminate the thing that you think you're not going to sell. And I've stopped many years ago now, Robert, to make what I call the eccentricity of finishing a finale. It's lovely to look at, I mean the explosion. I haven't got the time. It's a very costly proposition. And then finally, what for? In the showroom, when the customer comes and buys on the racks or wants to put a dress or two on the model, they reject the fancy one. They love to look at it, they laugh at it, and what do I do about it? So as a woman and being French, I don't do those anymore. I don't do a dress just because it's going to be a funny dress for the finale. I don't.
Let's take the round figure of 100, because it's an easy figure to work with. Let's assume a collection where 100 pieces. In your description of your sales force keeping you on track, you define the reality that they recognize that lifestyles in various parts of the country are very different, and the attitude towards fashion, therefore, is different. And they remind you that you need a dress with a short sleeve or with a jacket.
With sleeves.
And perhaps the reason for sleeves is that more and more women in middle years are recognizing that their skin and their body construction begins to change.
Exactly.
And they really should be covered at that particular time.
And they are the one who have the kind of money who buy our clothes.
Right.
Also, you see.
Right. Now, in a collection of 100, how many pieces would you say are the solid, saleable, practical, you've done it before, this is a slightly different version of it?
Let's say, on 100 pieces, we will probably produce 78, which is a lot. We will make 78 patterns. It's a lot. We keep the other 22, is that 22? Yes, for show pieces or to sell, for a charity, something. Sometimes we don't produce something because the fabric is not available on time. Sometimes we don't get the reorder. But it's very strange, you know. Sometimes everybody looks at a dress and says, well, it won't sell, and everybody is very surprised it sells. But the jersey dress, for instance, sometimes we make a jersey, it's got sleeves and it's got no waistline. We make 6 of those every year. I have to, because my customer, who is over 40, maybe over 50, let herself go a little bit at the waistline. She doesn't want to be cinched at the waistline. The belts are always too tight for her. She doesn't want to have that. So a straight dress, we know we have to make those. In the wool, that the famous Trigère that we use for 20 years or more, the famous jersey that I know, I'm wearing the pants in it today because I know it performs. We make those because the customer, the woman, wants to buy 2 or 3 dresses like that for her everyday life. So in a collection, right now I think that this collection, we have only 64 pieces. It's a short collection. We are very happy with it because there is less discard also. Also, the time is short. We don't have as much pattern makers. You see, in my world, in my Trigère organization, I am terribly involved, which is maybe not true of many designers, I don't know. The designer per se designs and then goes off somewhere, and the production takes over, changes a neck, soften up the shoulder. I don't know what they do. They couldn't do it with me because I protect my design, and I also know if it's going to work or not since I'm a technician. So I'm a very busy person. I would concede to, when we make a dress with a difficult sleeve, I will myself find a way of making it simpler for production. Sometimes you have to do that. I've got to get the clothes back. The contractors have to make them. They have to function. They have to hang on hangers, and the woman in the stores have to look at the dress. It's got to have a certain appeal on the hanger. All of that is the process of making a collection. For me is not an amusing thing of making only something that will be good for the papers. I'm trying to make something that's good for me, for Trigère, that we sell. It's a different thing than being employed as a designer and I discard my own stuff a lot.
You edit your own things.
Myself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, you make the final decision, don't you?
Not always. No. Not always. Sometimes something comes out too expensive, the sales force. If they can't sell something, we just take it off, I made in the last fall collection fabulous velvet, I think they were, velvet dresses and velvet coats. I made them in pure silk. The fabric was so expensive that you couldn't sell them because all of a sudden there is the rayon velvet, and I didn't want to use rayon velvet. Well, we didn't sell them. We took them away. We didn't even try. So I'll wear them myself maybe sometimes. It's very difficult to explain what I do. I'm terribly involved with I'm involved when a piece of fabric comes wrong, sometime with flows and sometime with this and with that. It's I am part of many things in Trigère.
Much more so than most designers. And I think the reason, realistically, is that most designers do not have the technical skills.
That's right.
They have an attitude towards style and fashion, in the sense that their point of view sometimes can be very exciting and very stimulating, but if asked to either sketch or drape or to walk into the factory...
They all sketch. They don't drape, but they sketch a lot.
Not all. I know some who don't sketch at all.
What do they do?
Well, it essentially is the business of taking something out of another context. In other words, you might go through a collection of Goya's paintings.
Oh, really?
And simply point that it's that shoulder or that décolletage or that direction. And they have people who can sketch, and like anybody else that works for somebody, you learn how to second guess them. I once asked a famous stage costume designer what he thought the best qualities were for such a person, and he said, the first talent is that you must be a mind reader. And in an interesting way, there's some validity to that, because what you say is that you are able to follow through on this and control all these things, which may explain why a Trigère dress stands completely identifiable as a Trigère dress or a coat.
Well, I do control. I also know that the clothes wear very well. Now, let's say Tuesday night, I went to the pension fund at the concert. It's a special,
Yes.
Special tickets and special this. And I was at the first tier, and I came early enough, and I was watching the people. And all of a sudden, I saw Alice Tully, who is a very good customer of Bergdorf and buys regularly lots of Trigères. And she was wearing a short dress. I was wearing a long old skirt and a new jacket, which was perfect for the concert. And I said to my escort, this is Alice Tully, I think she's wearing an old Trigère. And sure enough, I went down with her, and she talks to me in French all the time, and she says, Madame Trigère, please make me another dress like that. I said, you realize how old that dress is, Miss Tully? She says, I know. 6 years old. She bought it at Bergdorf. She loved it, what can I tell you? I know she trusts me. It was fun to see that. Again, we go back to the same thing. I don't want the customer to wear old dresses, but this woman is comfortable in what she wears, and that's it. She knows where the dress functions. She can sit in it. She can go to the restaurant after, and nothing will happen to it.
Well, that supports what you said before about every collection must have those things that become Trigère classics that women are comfortable wearing. But let me ask you, let's take another slight different direction here, because you did stimulate something in my head. The nature of publicity and image building in the fashion industry is largely related to fashion editors, fashion trade papers such as the Fairchild papers, responding to the glamour, the hysteria, the excitement, the bold statement, the avant-garde, the news-catching direction. And the reality is that what everybody seems to forget is they are not in the business of selling clothes. They are in the business of selling newspapers or magazines, and they do that by creating a whole sense of artificial or real excitement, depending upon how valid the new directions may be. One of the things that's always fascinated me is that you are like the tides. The tides come in, the tides go out, they go on constantly, and I've always said, I can tell you, some will come, some will go, but as long as Trigère is alive, there will be a Trigère, and there will be customers who will want those clothes, and the clothes will always be satisfying and gratifying.
I hope so.
Now, if you don't do the finale, are you risking rejection by some of the press on the basis that they have seen these clothes before?
They haven't seen the clothes before. That doesn't work like this. It isn't true, because it's a continuation of the clothes, and there is always something new in a collection. But what you're saying is very true. I'm not going to have an explosive, I don't know what, cabbage rose on the behind, because I don't think it's pretty to begin with. It's true, you reject that, but then at the end, the customer is really the judge. At the end, the customer is really what makes not the rules, but the final decision. And our customer, who in turn buys the clothes and get them in their shops, sell them to Mrs. Jones, Mrs. Smith, whatever. And this is the final judgment, I think, of what happened. I don't say that the extravagance, the very, very short skirts are not going to catch on with certain women. I suppose it will, for some of them, but some will never do, because I go out a lot and I see what's going on. When you talk about trade papers, the thing that bothers me, maybe, let's take the music world. You have Harold Schoenberg in the Times for 20-some odd years, I suppose, and you had Clive Barnes, and then you have the others who know something, I hope, about music. Then you have the theater critics who've been doing that for a long time, who allow themselves to say, well, that play stinks, or, excuse the expression, it won't work, and maybe they're right. But they are technicians in their own world, and that I respect. In our world, and I won't name the papers now, but one day you have a little reporter who's been working on food, who all of a sudden is given the job of being a critic. That bothers me, because first of all, those people don't wear the clothes, and most of the women who are doing that report don't even wear any clothes at all. That bothers me, because you do not have any more. Let's say a woman like Virginia Pope, who she invented the columns and reportage of the collection, she really did, or even a Kay Vincent, and they were telling you a little bit in a soft way that something was better than the others. But actually in the dress business, except for women's wear, who can put a big X on your collection if they don't like it, I don't think it's too fair, because I would admit that it would be fair if the same person were seeing, is the good correct word, I don't know, everybody's collection, which is an impossibility, we have too many. If that same person will go from 7th Avenue, from the 20th floor to the first floor, and report on this collection, I would say, okay, that person compare me to Robert Greene or to this one or that. But they don't. They come to me once, next day they go to something else. And I don't think that's fair, because they don't know enough about what they see. I don't know if I make myself clear.
No, very clear. I think there is a reality of and a lag between evaluating clothes or anything else without proper credentials, without proper.
That's exactly what I mean. Right. You know what I mean, and I'm glad that you're putting it in English. It's very difficult for me to accept that someone is going to pass a judgment on something that they are not expert, or at least having learning thing. That's bad for me. I don't care, because at the end, again, I say, I don't think that. Well, I don't know. Do you think that somebody who would say that, let's say, the Trigère collection is very bad, would really influence my customer? My customer have seen the collection at the same time, and I think, I don't know, maybe it would.
Well, I think that there is a what I call the corruption of small power.
Oh my God, it's terrific.
Which is really people who have positions which, such as columnists or people who are responsible for given pages of a magazine with a specific point of view. And it's very easy for them, living within the small island of their own experience and their own friends, to begin to believe that they really are the most important thing that ever happened, and that they're
That's bad, but this is very American, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think also that another thing has happened. You see, since the 60s and the change of direction, where I always thought of fashion, you see, in the earlier years, and it was interesting that you mentioned Virginia Pope and people like that, as a almost tyrannical force, in the sense that whoever it was that was motivated to decide that perhaps the direction should come out of the Matador, or come out of the Spanish world, or come out of the Bon Vie of France. Lots of ladies across the country were saying, well, the new direction is such and such, I have to be a Matador, you know, and so I will dress accordingly.
I told you that at our last session that I think that it was true now. Let's go back to the mini and the midi, and let's name women's wear, for instance, who really has, or would like to have, a terribly important say in the world of 7th Avenue and the designing world people. They tried to dictate, and maybe they succeeded in 19, whatever it was, when we had the mini and the midi. But everybody cursed them. The midi was a disastrous season, but disastrous for everybody. Nobody sold them. It was bad. I told you last time that I don't think the American woman is ever going to be dictated again. There will be some newcomer or not, or maybe someone who can be influenced. I think the American woman is logical. She buys clothes that she wants to buy, and she's learned to respect her kind of life and her figure. She buys really what she wants. A good salesgirl may sway a lady from one color to the other, but I know the women. I know them in the fitting rooms. Don't show me this. I say, well, try it sometime. I will, and I, as a salesperson in a fitting room, never push. As a matter of fact, I take off more dresses of customers' back if I don't like them, because we don't have really things to sell, you know. After all, we're not pushing the merchandise that's hanging in stock. But I do know the reaction of those women. They are pretty steady in their feelings. They know, and they have husbands who look at them, or whoever, lovers, whatever it is, who like them in certain things and not in others. And this has developed lately in the past 15 years.
Yeah, I think there's another thing that's also happening. I completely agree with what you're saying, but I think there's another direction that I find absolutely fascinating, and one that will influence the whole fashion industry enormously. And that is that people are beginning to change the priorities in their lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, in our world, it's a very strange thing. I don't know if it has anything to do with designing, but I would see a woman who would buy the most extraordinary furniture for her home, the most fantastic pieces of velvet, silk, brocade to put on the sofa that cost $100 a yard, who would not spend over $250 for a dress. Now, it's silly to compare because there are good clothes at any price, but to me, that's funny. She doesn't understand a dress in the relationship to her home. It's very strange.
One of the things that happens with that, and that's a very good example, is that in the minds of most people, what they put in their homes will last for a very long time.
Yes.
They can amortize the cost by saying, well, I'm going to upholster the couch in that terribly expensive fabric, but I will have the couch for 15 years.
Absolutely right, too, unless they're crazy. But you know, it's funny, but you see that, but also you have, I'm not going into customers' detail because some women are difficult to deal with, and we know all that. But in terms of designing, when I do a collection, my first priority is to do something for the firm that I own, of course, but I represent, and I do respect the name. There are some things I won't do. There are some things I'll dare doing, but we have to do soft things. I have the responsibility of 300 people or more, depending on the next season. I can't fluctuate like a yo-yo and decide today I'm going to make chiffon pants that I know I'm not going to sell. Well, I don't say I won't, you know, one evening thing. But I don't go to those fades. I can't. I have, and maybe I would if I'd been working for Mr. I don't know whom, because I wouldn't care, let him have the... I have to pay the rent, Robert. I've got to pay the employee who are there by the year. I've got to leave myself. So there is something in the process of working, making a collection. I would try to make it as saleable as I see in my mind, never being sure, of course. You never know. Then all of a sudden you send a dress I made a fitted dress in the fall last year with a plunging neckline. It was very pretty and fitted. And I remember vividly, somebody said to me, well, you know, it's fitted, they won't buy. Bergdorf alone used 72 dresses. It's a lot today for my kind of clothes. You know what they bought at 6? They bought 6 pieces.
At the beginning.
At the beginning.
Yeah.
Which is a nice order for among the 6 pieces of that dress, in probably 3 sizes, maybe 4 sizes. 72 pieces. They kept reordering and reordering. Then it's fun because the sales girl gets used to that dress. If she has a customer she doesn't know, she'll bring the dress and puts it on, and since it's a good dress and it fits, she'll have a 50% chance to sell it. It's strange because the whole thing works like this. I remember a buyer who used to be at Bergdorf for 20 years and retired, who used to tell me many years ago, it goes back 18, 20 years ago, when she told me, don't lose that body. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? Don't ever lose that body. Change the neck, change the sleeve, change the body. I said, I don't know how to do that. Well, I learned how to do that because she was right. It helps everybody around. We're not dealing with who is a customer today who buys couture exclusively, and it depends of her French sales girl, Givenchy, maybe it was, who can we name today? But the customer that we're going to see is a woman who needs to be directed a little bit. Our go-between is the salesperson.
Do you have any direct contact with the salespeople in the
only
stores?
Only when I go and do a show in the stores. When I go to Bergdorf, every girl will come to me, oh, I've got a customer for that, and I work with them for 2 days. They know me, I know them. If I go to Chicago, like I'm going in 2 weeks, I know the sales girl, and I know the customers. Everywhere I go, I tell them, and we have those 9 o'clock meetings, you know, with the sales girl explaining.
But that's what I meant. I mean, you
yes.
do have that. Do you have that in stores when out of town?
Always. And here in New York, we have them coming to us. We rent a bus, and they come at 6 o'clock. We give them a drink and a little sandwich or something, which is...
And tell me what you say at that time, too.
Well, let me tell you, those girls are exhausted when they come. So first of all, we give them a drink and they relax, and I try to amuse. So we show to those girls what the buyer has selected, plus a few things. For instance, some buyers will buy the dress and not the coat, or the coat and not the dress, and they may not buy the extravagance. We put a few of those too on several models, late at night in a very relaxed fashion. And I would say, you see, that dress, I think a customer who bought that famous coat last year should have that today. Also, it's a very easy dress to alter because the fitters come too. And the display people come too.
Well, that's interesting.
Very interesting. So the fitter, I said, you see, don't lift here. If you want to do that dress, do this or do that. It's easy to make an alteration because that's also a problem. So we have that relationship, and the girls are excited in seeing it. And they would say, well, Mr. So-and-so, did you buy it in the 14? Because I have Mrs. what's her name, remember? She could buy that in the 14. Did you buy it in blue? I would prefer the green. And so we change the order. That happens about, let's say, we show about 3-4 weeks after we show to the buyers. We always have 3 evenings, and we show the girls of Saks, the girls of we used to have Van Witt, and we have, unfortunately, we only have Bergdorf and Saks now, Lord & Taylor. So we had lots, they come and they love to do that. Out of town, when we show the collection out of town, let it be myself or my salespeople or my son, there is always a meeting scheduled for 9 or 9:30 where the whole store, if you take Neiman Marcus, when there is a meeting like this, it's an order. The people who sell toys, who sell shoes, stocking, comes and listen to the designer. Because why? Because if blue is the main color, they know they have to have a pair of shoes or a sweater or something to go, even in the lingerie. I think it's all tied up. Very few stores do that, but I think it's excellent. They also come for the enjoyment. Well, I could be funny, sometimes it's dreary. But they do come. At Neiman Marcus, you have the whole store, the furriers, the salespeople, the shoe people, they all come. You have an audience of 150 to 200 people in the morning.
I find that completely believable as a process, and I'll tell you why, Pauline. The sense that I've always had about fashion is that it doesn't lead anything. It simply reflects the changes in the culture, in the times. And the person who is wise enough to see those changes and translate them so that the direction that is given to the customer allows them to never be behind the times. They are always, in the true sense of the word, with it.
Well, they are. Now, let's see, my last trip at Neiman Marcus in Houston, even the hairdresser came. When I came to the salon to have my hair, he said, oh, you had a marvelous show. I said, well, I was there. And I have a customer who will look, even the hairdresser will advise, there is a very special relationship between somebody who touches your hair and your face and so on. It's very good. But also the salesgirl who lives a difficult life. She can't walk at the end of the day because it's, sometimes it's kilometers, miles loves to pick up what it is. I'm not talking about myself, I'm sure the others do the same thing. So they pick up, well, Miss Trigère said that. She's so pleased to translate it to the customer. It gives her something to think about. It could be very difficult to sell day in, day out that merchandise.
Doesn't it also educate her eye as to how to look at this dress and how to really see it?
And then also not to put it backwards. With the loose tops, you get more backwards to front where there are no dots in the front. Sometimes it works. Well, I laugh a lot because even when we rehearse the thing, when you go to a store, you don't have time to rehearse. We select, let's say, 25 pieces to show in the morning. The things that we think are more representative of the collection, the new silhouette. You'll be surprised time and again that a model will put the back to front, and sometimes it creates a very amusing things. If it's a very low décolleté in the back, it makes for a very vivacious meeting in the morning. The boobs are coming out and it's funny.
Have you ever found that by somebody doing an accidental thing of that nature that they actually created something?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, sure. Now, you talk about McArdle before.
Yes.
I have read years, maybe it's in the book too, that Claire said that she never let a dress unturned. She turned it upside down. She did a pop over. It comes. She put it back to front all the time, and I can understand her. It's true, because she extracted all the possibility, and her creations were absolutely pure. Nothing, nobody did anything like Claire. She did her own stuff.
Yes, it was the reason that I suggested her name perhaps as the first lady of American designers was because she was so original.
She was original in a way that is extraordinary. Well, the woman was really perfect for what she was doing because she was a skier, she was a sportive lady. She knew that when she was cold, she had to she didn't worry about a hat that was flying. She was going to cover her head with a hood. She did the first jersey hood. We do a lot. She was extraordinary, and she also dressed herself, I think, that woman.
Yes.
She was tall.
Yes, she was, and she was very American in her body structure.
She never
as well.
went to Paris for that, never. Yes, she was, but she talked about her with, you know who? Sally Kirkland.
Yes, she knows it very well. Let me pursue one other point that you made, and that was the display person. I find that absolutely fascinating, that the display person from a store would come and see the collection and hear you talk about the collection.
Well, they don't come well, they do. Everybody do, because when we go to a store, there is always a couple of dresses in the window, hopefully. In the case of Bergdorf, the relationship is so close between the backdrop, the colors of the clothes that will be in the window, that they have to come to see what they're going to put in the back of the clothes. And it's interesting because they also learn the difference about the clothes they put in the windows. It doesn't become, it becomes, instead of an anonymous dress, almost a friend. They know that they're going to put it that way and not that way. The dummy will face Fifth Avenue, it won't face 58th Street. It's funny the way they see the dress when they see it worn by a model.
Because they see it as a live
Well, we're talking
force.
about very special stores right now. When you go in the provinces, you send 4 pieces, maybe it's all red or maybe it's all blue. I try, when we talk windows to stores, when we have a Trigère show, to have at least 4 pieces that relate, not a purple and a red and a yellow. I don't like that. So on windows, for instance in Chicago next week, the window is all black and white. It's fun, we don't do a window. We work at it, it's time consuming.
The backdrop interests me because the backdrop really sets the stage for how the clothes should be presented.
In some stores it never changes, Robert. It's always the dark thing or maybe a mirror, and sometimes they stop with the mirrors because sometimes what they put in the windows is a size 12, and the size 12 is too big for the dummy, so you have to put a pin. If you put a pin, you see it in the mirror, so that they stop. Some stores don't take stores like Saks, like Lord & Taylor, the backdrops are changed all the time, it's very costly. They do it simply, but they do it beautifully.
Do you think of the total design of a dress as similar to sculpture? Because that's what one sees in sculpture is looking at it from every conceivable angle.
Well, you must. I think that the dress has to look. I told you my incident about not putting too many things in the bag because, except for a train. I think that actually a woman at a party is going to be seen from the front, from the back. If she stands up, they'll see. If she goes out of the theater, somebody's going to see the back. I think it's very important that everything matches and is constructed properly. But look, let's not go into sculpture and things like this. I don't know. Maybe clothes deserve to be put into cages too, and it is. I mean, the thing that we do that Diana Vreeland makes, it's terrific.
Well, you see, I don't think you can dismiss fashion from one of the arts. I've always thought of it as that way because I think it is wonderfully three-dimensional. Clothes on how do you feel about this? There have been designers who say that unless you can look at the clothes on a hanger and see that it's a beautiful outfit, a beautiful coat, a beautiful dress, the designer hasn't done their job. Other people feel that you have to put it on somebody.
Well, you have to put it on somebody. In the ready-to-wear, since you're going to show the clothes on racks, at least they must close properly, and you cannot have things hanging because that's ugly. If we have too many things, if it's a two-piece, for instance, which we do a lot of, I tell you, until we decided to put longer straps so that the skirt looks, not that it's a Toulouse-Lautrec, you know, short, you have to try to do something to attract the eye. Of course you do. I, being always the practical person that I am, I think, try not to put too many clothing and too many things that are difficult for a woman to hook. Not everybody has an elevator boy at her disposal, or a husband, or a butler, or a maid, so maybe she has to dress herself. How you have to think about those things.
Yeah, that brings up a wonderful story about Calvin Klein. Calvin Klein went to the Balenciaga show at the Metropolitan and was completely confused about, well, I don't understand these clothes, he said. Who wears such clothes? I mean, how do you get into them? How do you get out of them? And of course the answer very simply was that when Balenciaga designed, it never occurred to him that the women that he designed for didn't have two maids
exactly.
who were putting her in
exactly.
and out.
But you see, today, no, first of all, the life is much too fast today. And the Calvin Klein, the Trigère, the Blas, we know that we have to be practical alongside, you know, when you made buyers' dresses a lot, it was sometimes very difficult. I remember, I have them in the museum, a buyer's dress that was spirally, and I couldn't because the fabric started from the right and it went to the left. There was no way that I could put the zipper on the left side, which is a normal thing if you are right-handed, which most people are. Well, I had to put the zipper on the left side, and I tell you, we couldn't ship it like that. I turned the dress completely out. We shipped it the other way around because I knew that in the store, the woman invariably will not put it here, she would put back to front. You have to think about those things, so sometimes you are limited in doing certain things. Every time you have a bow that doesn't bow, doesn't tie properly, we feel it when we have shows in the showroom and when the girls, the models are putting the dress 7, 8, 9 times a day, that at the end of the day the bows are very fatigued, you have to press them. A woman wears a dress once and hopefully she has it pressed by her maid or somebody herself if she doesn't have anybody. But when you put the clothes in and out all the time and you have to make that fresh bow perky, you have to have an iron next door to you to refresh it. All of that comes into the processes of designing for a wholesale collection that will be dragged in trunks. We used to travel with trunks, you know, like the steamer's trunk. You can't anymore, the planes don't take that. We still travel in enormous big suitcases and the clothes are packed in pliofilm things with the hangers. They come out with hangers. But they have to be pressed, and I tell you, it's a disaster. After the collection travels 6 weeks, you don't recognize the clothes because they are pressed many times by people who don't know what they do with them. If we have something fresh, it's creased. Yes. You know, it's like the pants you wear. You don't want your pants you want the pleat, but you don't want it so sharp that it's a knife. All of that, you know, goes, a chiffon dress that travels, a big skirt that travels. It's very difficult for everyone to now we have shows and we start on a Monday, we leave on Sunday, and then the collection is to be shown at 11 o'clock on Monday morning. I tell you, Robert, I don't do those shows. If I have to do a show on a Monday, I'm going to the store on Saturday to do my fittings on Saturday because I want my clothes pressed. If I come Sunday night, by the time they open the store and my show's at 11 o'clock, I don't do the show because I'm too difficult and I don't like to see the things unpressed. All of that is tough, and we know that a fabric sometimes, my God, that fabric didn't press, or it's limp after 3 pressing. And next time around, I won't buy it from the manufacturer.
You ever think about what the responsibilities are from the dry cleaner to the
well, we do. Well, the dry cleaner is a difficult thing today. We used to have the fancy one and the good ones. Today, a dry cleaner, you know, kills the button, kills the things. But I remember people 15 years ago who told me that they would never wear a dress more than twice, and out it went to I think that's ridiculous too. You don't have to do that unless you just spill soup on it, you know. And that's bad because you can't fatigue a garment Also the French dry cleaner, the so-called French dry cleaner, were precise in taking the little spots. Doesn't they just dump the dress in a big vat of something? Sometimes it's a blue. Listen, we just had an accidental thing the other day. We did a duplicate of a dress from the summer collection, the resort collection, which was done, 6 weeks ago. It's black and it's orange print. And then we made the duplicate just the day before yesterday. And I have the duplicate on the model, looking perfectly all right. And I said, well, let me have the sample. I want to see what the neck looks like. And my sample is completely, but the whole top, because of the light, the very, very sharp light on our stage, it has faded the thing. Well, we call the manufacturer in Italy. I can't have that. How can I have that? I cannot have a woman sitting somewhere for 2 days and then the top of her dress is going to fade. Out it goes. That was the first time it happens to me. First time I realized that the dress faded after 5 weeks of showing. When it was a bad dye, I'm sure, because it shouldn't happen.
No, it should not. Of course, lighting in our society has become another situation that presents itself as affecting fashion, affecting clothes. As interior designers change the direction of lighting, you see any relationship with that to the function of designing clothes for new kinds of lighting areas?
Well, it used to be, in France, used to be when you receive people at night, just soften the light, it's better for the women's complexion and so on. I hope that I don't have to add this to my worries. I hope that I don't have to do another investigation if the fabric is going to fade or not, because my God, I'll retire then, that's too much. But we do have, you know what happened? A customer would wear a coat a long time with dye to match buttons. But after she puts on the coat 50 times, if it's not, your buttons on a men's suit is natural something. We dye a red or a purple or a yellow to match, and after the friction of the fingers and so on, it fades. We get buttons returned, and then we have to dye them again. We don't like that very much, it's time consuming, but I understand the problem of the customer. She wants to have a button that matches her coat. That again enter in the fabrication of the sample. Because again, every time a thing like this happens, it costs the firm money. Every time somebody writes you a little letter saying, Dear Miss Trigère, it will mostly be addressed to me. I love your clothes, blah, 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 but the thing, well, you have to answer back and you have to take it. Some are unrealistic about things like this, but most of the women who write to me, and I would usually tell them to go back to the store where they buy the thing. I'd rather deal with the store than with the private lady, you know, naturally, because that's too much. But every time you get a little complaint, it's time consuming. And money.
Yes, and it cuts into the profits.
Always, always.
I always find myself thinking about the relationship of architects to fashion. And the reason I do is because when I look at collections and I see somebody presenting, for instance, the whole period of the layered look when there were coats worn on top of coats and 4 scarves, and I found myself thinking, apart from the fact that if you travel in the subway, that becomes an impossible thing to wear. It's Isadora Duncan time. It's a wonder there weren't more people killed.
Indeed, you get caught in the door.
Absolutely. But I was thinking of closets, the function of closet space. We don't live in the kind of mansions that allowed a woman to have endless closet space.
And the hangers, I tell you, are not made to carry scarves. I don't think we have one scarf hanger that's proper. I had some made for me. I had some bars. It's like an exercise, really like an exercise bar. That's on what I put my big scarves, because I had no way of putting them. If I wanted a scarf, it was always the one below, and everything's on the floor, and I go to the theater with all the damn thing on the floor. You know, it's a marvelous remark that you've done. I have always been told that our clothes are very architecturally conceived and constructed I think they are well constructed, and I think if I have a seam somewhere, it has a purpose. It's going to give me the shape of the bust, the godet, the thing. It doesn't have any, and this I think is my forte. I don't want to sound, I don't want to sound immodest about it, but it's true. I respect, I know how to cut. And when I make a cut, it has a feeling, and people will refer to that. This is typical Trigère. It's a Trigère cut. It's very difficult to reproduce sometimes because I avoid the darts that we used to have. The Italian tailors, for instance, for years I used to joke with them. Their women were with big bosoms, and they had big darts here, and another darts under the arm, and it was almost like a brassiere before we had the John Closs things. I avoid that. I try to avoid that because it's not pretty. And I think I know how to work the fabric until it gives me the feeling of a shape without having, you don't know where it comes from. That's hard, but I know how. I mean, not everything is successful, but I think that I know how.
Do you see any relationship between the construction that you talk about and an earlier designer named Charles James?
Yes, except that he was extremely difficult, and his clothes, I understand when they were flat, were exactly like puzzled. They were like puzzle, and you really had to have golden hands to put them together. That's why he did not want to become a little modernized. He just went ahead with the same feeling of being a great stubborn man, a great designer. But I tell you that he should have softened up, because there are something that you can't have today. You don't have the people to make them. I remember there is a dress. I told you I showed an old dress in the collection, and there is a picture taken in 1948 or 9 by the New York Times. There is a dress by Jimmy Galanos, a dress by Norel, there is Charles James, Jimmy, myself, and Norel, and each one with the prototype. The Charles James dress is an absolute beauty. It's fantastic. It's got a small corselet in velvet, and it's curly-cued in a fantastic fashion in white satin. But to have done this must have cost, I don't know, 100 hours of labor, which nobody can afford to pay, and you don't find the hands to do it. So you've got to find another way of doing it. You have to simplify it. He didn't want to. It was all of one piece. It wouldn't have any concession, would you say, compromising.
Yes. Because there is an element of compromise. When I spoke before about architects, I was thinking of the reality that apartments, even expensive apartments, do not have enormous walk-in closets anymore.
They sure don't. Well, that's a fallacy of space. Everything, in this apartment, which is still high ceiling, if they will rebuild that, they will put one more floor in the same space.
Yes.
That's, look at the lobby. I always marvel when I go to the Four Seasons at this extravagance of not the space used for nothing, just for the enjoyment of people. That doesn't, the buildings, I suppose they have to do it. I went, yesterday I saw an apartment in, I can say freely.
Yes, of course.
I visited Eugenia Shepherd in her new apartment at, across Carnegie Hall. Well, Robert, it's sensational. That little woman, she has a living room which is about 2.5 size this time. It's tremendous. You're not going to have apartments like that anymore. They don't. Nobody's going to pay the rent for that. It's too bad. We're losing beautiful way of working, but you have to adjust it. That's all there is to it. My assistant, Lucy Porges, told me last year something very extraordinary. We used to line the jersey dresses with matching China silk, pure silk, China silk, which you cannot get. It's as simple as that. You can't get it unless you want to pay $6 or $7 a yard for a lining that the woman doesn't see until she puts it on. So you put the lining with a little polyester or something. That's a concession. She said, "You're going to do that?" I said, "I've got to." But then we used to dye the green with the green and the purple with the purple and the red, always. I can't do that either. And we had to compromise. So we now line in a nude, inoffensive color. It's, flesh color. And we put it sometimes.
Something that will go with everything.
Well, it goes, except the blacks. and navy blue maybe, and some red. She came to me. I said, let it go. She says, how can you say that, Pauline? I said, I can say because that's the way She says, you can't. You've taught me for 20 years to be so perfect. I said, Lucy, I want to be as perfect as possible. I've got to make concession. The girl she thought that I had made with myself such a, how would I put that in English? She said that I was giving away some of my most belief. I mean, I just had to, I can't, what can I do? What can I do if I can't get the merchandise to go with that? What am I going to do?
And if you cannot use your ethics, your beliefs, your direction, the traditional Trigère touch at a price, because if you can't do it at
the
a price,
touch I still can get.
You can't make profit, though.
No, but you see, if I continue to now, I discover, when I discovered that I was stupid in putting my pure silk thing, when I looked at the dress that, by the way, was our friend Bill Blass, I turned it around and I said, my God, he's lining his jersey dress in something with polyester. I came back to my office, we're going to do the same thing. Why not? If he can do it, I can do it too. You have to learn listen, it's difficult to say that you're not going to compromise. It's like politics, I think. You cannot be all of one piece today. You cannot be Mr. what's his name, Khomeini, the fanatic. You can't. Everybody has to give and take a little bit. And that goes for...
It's almost like interpersonal relationships. In some funny sort of way, I always think of the fashion designer doing a collection for the unknown customer out there, the person who will buy these things. It only works effectively if your relationship to them is like a marriage. You do know who they are.
Absolutely.
You do understand the way they live their lives.
When you go on the road, I mean, there is no such a thing of working in a close... when you work, when I work, sometime I will make an extravagant. I said, forget it, Pauline. It's not going to work. It's not going to be puttable on a woman's body, so out it goes. But it's true that when you work, you think of Mrs. what's her name there. Also, in my trade, in my work, I do a collection that will, I hope, be attractive to the New York customer, which is probably the same as the Chicago customer, and then maybe San Francisco. Then we start switching. The Los Angeles customer has to have something indifferent in tones, in coloring. The one in Houston and the one in Dallas, that's has some relationship. But they don't buy the same thing they buy in New York. Maybe an evening dress. But the coats, for instance.
Is that merely a climate difference?
It's a climate difference. Well, yes and no, because in Dallas, Texas, where you don't really many times need a fur coat, they sell more mink coats and sable coats. This is status symbol, maybe. But when I talk about cloth coats or a coloring, in California, you don't sell too much black, you see. You don't. The coloring of the sky wants you to be beige and blue and maybe brick and maroon, but black at night maybe so. But in California, we have different colors in the books because we know that certain buyers cannot buy what we will wear in New York.
Yes, black is for mourning in California.
It is.
Yes, I don't mean M-O-R-N-I-N-G. I mean M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, yes. For death.
Yeah, for death.
Yeah.
Well, but it's funny because women who never wore black, let's say Palm Beach. Palm Beach is a very interesting thing. In Palm Beach, for years at night, Palm Beach is an extravagant city. The conglomeration of the people there, it's a cross-section of the world. I mean, people from Venezuela, from Mexico, from Cuba, from Chicago.
And a high concentration of power and money.
Yeah, and Canada and the rest of it. You see almost everyone there. And at night, you used to sell just all the colors of the rainbows, you know that. Right now, in the past 3 years, a woman who says, I'm tired of it, can I have a little black dress? And it's funny, because when I go to the famous theater in Palm Beach, if I'm there at the opening of Monday night, which is kind of a very peculiar evening and fun, I wear black dress, and I tell you, Robert, just because of the color, I stand out before they even look at what I wear. And I wear a lot of black for two reasons. I like it on me, and I wear gold jewelry, but also because it's very practical for me. My shoes, my bag, I don't have to, if I wear, I wear a lot of red, but in the evening, I wear black a lot, I think. I don't want to make generalities like this because it's silly.
Well, except that there is a reality. The basic, the little black dress has been with us forever because it's a functional dress.
It never went,
Exactly.
I mean, it was only in the papers that it went. The little black dress has always been there.
I think also there's something else. When you talk about Palm Beach, you are essentially talking about a aging population. Palm Beach, I once said on a television show, was a wonderful place to live for old people.
Did you say
and their
that?
Parents.
God, they killed you?
Well, yes and no.
But you take your chances, you see. I do that too. You have to. It's strange. Now you see a few younger people in, but not much.
No,
not much.
The younger people that you see in Palm Beach are grandchildren visiting, essentially.
But in Palm Beach, something that's funny now is when we go with a collection, you don't sell Palm Beach, well, you sell Palm Beach clothes if they are there, to be worn tomorrow night at that ball, at that thing. They have balls every night. But what we do sell in Palm Beach is, especially now, is the collection of spring. We take 6 to 8 weeks deliveries. Let's say when we will go in Palm Beach, it'll be the end of January. Most of the spring collection, the spring delivery won't be done. You sell Mrs. What have you, a costume or 2 or 3 when she comes back to New York, when she goes back to Toronto, when she goes back. I go to Toronto.
To be worn when she goes back.
So you sell really things for the future, because the thing in Palm Beach, the season is very short. And what they want is a black dress, an evening dress to wear tomorrow night. During the day, Palm Beach, they don't wear many clothes. I mean, they wear pants, trousers, jeans, whatever, and little sweaters, T-shirts and things like this. But it's an interesting, I like to go to Palm Beach because you really, I have met more people there. Remember, Ms. Trigère, I met you? I don't remember, but they remember me, thank God, that's good. But it's extraordinary, the amount of people that concentrated in February in Palm Beach from all over the world, from England if they can afford to come. It's fascinating.
Well, it's a comfortable area for people who have great money and who want ways to use that money.
And reassure themselves.
You see, in a funny sort of way, Palm Beach is not unlike culturally an area like Fire Island. Fire Island, certain parts of Fire Island are essentially a gay population. It's very comforting for someone who is gay to go and build their lovely house and give their parties with their gay friends.
And feel belonging.
And feel that it's their community, their territory, their turf, and their culture. In other words, all their behavior patterns become acceptable and reassuring to one another.
You're very right. It's a very good comparison.
And when you go to Palm Beach, you feel it in terms of people who are aging. Women who no longer... you always see in Palm Beach what I call the reflections of great beauty, great handsomeness.
Do you think it's only particular to Palm Beach? Would you say that it's not the same on the Côte d'Azur? I haven't been on the Côte d'Azur except en passant,
The difference in the Côte d'Azur, I have a house in the Côte d'Azur.
Where?
And at Cap d'Antibes.
Oh.
Well, not quite at the Cap, between Juan-le-Pin and the Hotel du Cap.
Yes.
And I've seen the changes develop. The difference between Palm Beach and the Côte d'Azur is that Palm Beach still has not been invaded by the middle-class merchant who has made some money. It still is the great names of American robber baron fame and international fame.
Well,
whereas the Côte d'Azur, you get the Germans, the Japanese, you get people who are rich and
the Dutch with the rucksack, with the group and the kids
all
and
that
business, which is not very
a lot
pretty.
of marching. Palm Beach is a mecca for people It's all relative. When my father, for instance, was given a testimonial dinner by a hospital that he had been a treasurer for 25 years, I think I was in my 50s, early 50s. And I remember going to the dinner and having men who were in their 70s and 80s, his contemporaries, turn to me and simply say, "What a nice boy you turned out to be."
That's cute.
You see, it is a relative kind of thing. You are bound to feel a little younger, and your standards of beauty are the same. It is very interesting to realize that you talked about Bette Midler in the previous tape, and I realized something when I saw her on screen. When she's on the screen alone, it is a remarkable face, a challenging, interesting, handsome, exciting woman. But it is not conventional beauty. As soon as you put her on the screen with other women who are truly conventionally beautiful, she looks unattractive.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true in Palm Beach. If you take ladies who are aging and surround them with other ladies that are aging and men that are aging, the eye adjusts to a relative acceptance
but it's a
of
very,
beauty.
Washington is becoming a very good city for me, and becomes a very good city because we've dressed very prominent ladies there who are very well dressed, and it's a copycat thing. Palm Beach is the copycat. What did she get? What did she not get? Because they'll see each other. They see each other constantly. That would really drive me crazy.
The other thing, however, that the two cities share something in common. I know both cities because I have spent considerable time in both cities. They are what I call seasonal cities.
Washington too?
Also, people go back to their congressional, senatorial, moneyed areas. The people who are the lobbyists have to go back to the headquarters of whatever they're lobbying for. The Senate, the Congress, they all have to return to place some relationship of themselves into their hometowns, into their regions, into their states that support and elect them. They have something in common. The people in Palm Beach can copy one another because in, quote, real life, they live everywhere from Brazil, Buenos Aires, to Toledo, Ohio, to Boston, Massachusetts, to Big Sur in California.
And it's funny when you go to a dinner party, you see the same people. Hopefully you see, you also see the same waiters and the same, the food sometimes is different, but you can see when a hostess makes her own selection of the flowers and when she sets the table a little bit differently, that pleases me. Most of the women, very few know really a lot, and it's funny to see that what you saw last week at one party will be copied. It's amusing to see that.
Well, the reality, of course, is that we are all influenced by the forces that enter our lives, and style, in terms of being able to develop it for oneself, comes, as fashion does, from the education of the eye. I mean, you have to learn, and the only way
I think
people
it's
can
fabulous.
learn...
I think to be exposed, I think that the people, I'm going to give you a little example of someone. When I buy fabric, I need the girls on the stage to hold them for me to see the color, what is going to go under the light, what it does, blah, blah, blah. And my models know how to do that very well. And the other day we were very busy, and the two models were busy putting on clothes for the customer, and I took a boy who's with us 2 years who sketches the garment for the book as a reference for the future. And I said, John, you're going to put those fabrics. And he took the fabrics, and it was so peculiar and so clumsy. And I looked at him and I said, you haven't learned. I don't understand. Do you know what a selvage is? He said, what? I said, selvage. The selvage is this way. You hold the fabric like that. And to me, this will be something, it's like holding a frying pan by the handle. You can't take it by the middle.
Yes.
If you do, then you haven't learned that the handle is there to hold it. It's very rare. I told you about this Japanese boy that I had for a week. He would know how to because he wanted to learn. Some people are blocked in a way.
Also, we live in a world of such unbelievable specialization. That young man who can sketch believes that he has finished his training. He has finished
no,
the
not this one, because he sketches only the thing that we give him to sketch when the garment is already being ready to ship. It's for the book that, you know.
Yes, but you know what I'm saying. In other words, he has not learned the total relationship to all these things. Now, we're going to close here, Pauline, because this is the end of our second session. We have another session.
You sure?
Yes, we do. I'll tell you why. Because I have a whole large list of questions that have been presented by the forces at the Fashion Institute of Technology for historical reasons. They want to know certain things. But also in talking with you, of course, one constantly registers in the back of one's mind the unfinished thing. Let me just prepare you for the next session. You have mentioned Lucy, your assistant. I want to talk about assistants. I want to talk about the development of assistants and what qualifications people should have to honestly enter that particular role. I want to find out about Adele Simpson. You dropped that in the first interview and said that's a whole other story. I want to know that story. Okay. There are many questions. So we will meet again and we will do this. And then at some point we will make another date for you at your atelier. I want the cameras, the video cameras, to simply come in and look and see, so that forever everybody can see the nature of where you worked and how you worked. And that, because that's going to be wonderful, I think, and exciting. And then to see some of the forces that you mentioned. You mentioned the boy sketching for the book. You mentioned Lucy.
Well, lots of, everybody works in a different way, I guess.
Yes.
I don't know how they do. I have no system. I invented my own system. I always said that I said many, many times that I would have given, I don't know what, for a week of my life to be working with Balenciaga. And I really mean it, because the man, to me, was a genius in the way he cut his garment. He never sketched. Though I saw, you know, in the exhibition of Balenciaga, I saw his book with the little swatch.
Yes.
We're going to make that in red.
And there were little sketches there. There were little lines that...
they were about the kind of a sketch I do.
But they may not have been his... I always suspected that maybe he didn't do those.
Maybe he didn't do that. Yeah. He was a pure tailor, you know.
Exactly. So. And also so into the mental process of his relationship to clothing. Incredible. But we can pursue all that. Thank you so much, Pauline Trigère.
Listen, thank you. I think it's fun. It's marvelous to be able to go back to all those things. I don't know. It's difficult for me to express myself really well. You know how to close this?